Myanmar, or Burma as some still call it, is slowly emerging from a half-century of dictatorship, with political and economic reforms allowing at least some of its people to realise long-cherished dreams. But most have yet to experience the full benefits of that new freedom, and the country remains one of the poorest in the world. So will it ever catch up with its more prosperous neighbours? Reporter Sara went to find out.
Sacred and golden. This is where the people of Myanmar have come to pray for more than 2,500 years. The Shwedagon Pagoda has towered over Yangon, outlasting kings, colonies and coups. That history is still an important part of life in Myanmar today. Change is rolling in. Myanmar is opening up to new ideas, industries and cultures after almost half a century locked away. There are now more than 20 daily newspapers and dozens of weekly journals. And while many of these papers self-censor, readers are at least getting some coverage of the rapid developments in their own country and a wider window on the outside world.
I think we can be reasonably confident that this degree of political liberalisation will continue. We can be somewhat confident that moves towards democracy will continue as well. But I think how ordinary life will change, whether income inequality will simply get worse, and whether the lives of the poorest half of the country, 2/3 of the country, if that will change, I think remains a big question mark.
The newspapers are still delivered in the old-fashioned way, with the tug of a rope and the ring of a bell. It's just one example of how the old and new are woven together as Myanmar's economy expands. In the past 2 years, parliamentary elections have been held, sanctions have been lifted, and the economy is now growing rapidly. But it's not a one-dimensional story.
I think a lot of the coverage of this country for a very long time has been very simplistic. It was seen as a country where the only story was the story of the military junta and the generals versus the democracy movement in Aung San Suu Kyi, whereas in fact it was a much more complicated political situation.
So this was one of the most modern buildings in the region at the time, wasn't it?
It was one of the most modern buildings in Southeast Asia. It has the first underground car park in Southeast Asia.
I'm taking a walk through Yangon's historic district with author and historian Thant Mint Oo. At its peak in the 1920s and 30s, Rangoon, as it was then known, was at the crossroads of Asia, set to become one of the most important cities in the region.
Like many of the old colonial era buildings in this area, this would have been where you went to book a passage to France or upriver to Mandalay.
Thant Mint Oo has a deep interest in history. His grandfather was Secretary General of the United Nations in the 1960s. Thant wants to put Myanmar back on the map.
In those days, if you wanted to fly from London to Melbourne, you had to come through Rangoon at the time.
It was almost like the Dubai of its time.
Exactly, and it was a place where people came to for shopping from Singapore, from Bangkok, as well as from elsewhere.
Myanmar is now trying to catch up with its neighbours. There have been more foreign investment projects here in the past 3 years than in the previous quarter of a century. Half of all mobile internet users have come online in the past year. Office rents in some parts of Yangon are now more expensive than New York. But 70% of people in Myanmar still don't have basic services such as electricity.
The country has not benefited at all from the general progress we've seen in Asia. And what that means first and foremost is that we have 60 million people, 59 million of whom are poor in a way that they probably don't have to be.
The World Bank rates Myanmar as one of the most difficult places on earth to do business. The poor are being denied their share of wealth because of crippling corruption.
One of the huge tragedies of the past 50 years is that the independent judiciary and the first-rate judiciary we had 50 years ago is gone after 40, 50 years of military rule. And I think without that strong judiciary and that strong rule of law apparatus from the police through the judges and the Supreme Court, it's going to be very difficult to tackle.
Myanmar's past is still drifting into the present. The currents run fast and strong on the Yangon River. You'd expect a city of more than 2.5 million people to have a bridge at its busiest crossing. But decades of economic stagnation have delivered little infrastructure. People and produce are packed in side by side.
Despite the changes over the past 2 years, there are still really strong divisions socially and economically here in Myanmar, and this river is one of them. We're catching the ferry at the moment over to an area called Dalar, which is one of the poorest areas of Yangon.
There are few signs of any economic transformation here. The people of Dalar are stuck in the mud. They live perched above putrid water, rubbish and sewage. There's no reliable electricity and little sign of the government. This is how millions of people live in Myanmar.
Every time I'm thinking, how long I have to live here, how long? Oh no, I can't stand with the power, like power cut very often, and the water also not clean.
Kindergarten teacher Vung Dae Lun was shocked when she moved here 2 years ago. She could see that children on this side of the river didn't have the opportunities of those in downtown Yangon.
Here the children, they have no money, so they cannot go a good tuition, they cannot go a good school. And for the teacher also, who, how to say, they really need who have a heart for them.
These children are the first to grow up in democracy in Myanmar for more than 50 years. But there's huge inequality. Less than 10% of poor children in Myanmar have the opportunity to attend preschool.
Very good. The reason for why we are here, we don't want them to poor forever, so we want to direct them. Let's put down your feet.
Almost 1/4 of the children are underweight. More than 35% are stunted. For Vung Dae Lun, it's a victory every time she sees one of her students go on to primary school and excel.
Whenever I saw them on the stage, they are taking a pride. Oh, I am one proud teacher. Every time I'm saying I'm in the right place and I am in the needed place. Every time I've got to remind me this word.
For some, the changes in Myanmar can't come fast enough. 23-year-old Moon doesn't want to be a teacher or work in the slums. She wants to be a global pop star, and remarkably, that's now possible.
It's everything. It's everything. Without music, I don't know what I'm gonna be like.
Moon is part of a girl group called Myanmar Girls. When they started out 4 years ago, they had to submit their song lyrics to the military censors. Now the band has an international recording contract.
I think now, not only the youth, even like the older people in Burma, they start to relate to international culture, and they can accept now.
These would-be stars have choices and opportunities that their mothers and grandmothers could not have imagined. Moon has already graduated from university with a degree in Russian.
I think it's because of my family. My family is very, very different from other families in Myanmar.
Moon's father is a Baptist pastor. The family comes from the Kachin ethnic minority in the north of the country. Despite the apparent conservatism, Moon's father is supportive of his daughter's career. Moon knows that she's one of the fortunate few in Myanmar able to make the most of the country opening up. Only months ago, this was a dilapidated riverfront warehouse. Now it's a flash new retail space, the venue of an expat networking event for women at the top end of town who are helping to drive the change. Vicky Bowman is one of them. She first arrived in the 1990s and went on to become British ambassador here.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Myanmar businesses here are slightly frustrated by what they're seeing from the international community. and the international business community, but I think probably they don't realise that businesses have choices to make. This is not the only country in the world where they can invest, and they're going to be looking at rule of law, they're going to be looking at the costs, they're going to be looking at the commercial equation, whether or not they can get their product out of the country.
Now Vicky Bowman is working for an NGO campaigning against corruption. She says business has been slowed by poor government decision-making.
But it's more than anything been a consequence of lack of electricity, lack of infrastructure. So those are some of the key problems that potential manufacturers now are saying, that they would like to come in here, they would like to take advantage of Myanmar's cheaper labour, but they don't have the electricity, they can't run the diesel generator 12 months a year in their factories. It's too costly and it won't make them competitive.
Vicky Bowman is part insider and part outsider. She's married to a former Burmese political prisoner who's now a high-profile artist. She knows more than most that change is slow and it's come at a high price.
You get an awful lot of people coming in thinking this is the next frontier. It's a country which has probably up to 60 million people, so it's very significant. I think companies who've come in over the last 2 years, most of them have realised they probably need to take things quite slowly because it's not straightforward.
This is how a lot of money moves in Myanmar, by car. It's estimated that only 5% of transactions are made through the outdated banking system. The rest are done like this, in cash and in person. Reform is stopping and starting, but it's enough to lure young entrepreneurs prepared to come home to Myanmar and set up a business.
Oh, the risk was very high. I don't think I slept very well in the first 6 months or the months leading up to it. And I knew that if I shared this with my family, I don't think they would agree. So actually, I called my parents 1 week before I came back. So literally 1 week.
Nay Ung has established an online travel agency. The profits are adding up. But in the beginning, he couldn't even find an office with adequate internet.
So what I had to do was I have to walk at different coffee shops. And I happened to find a really good place where they have the best internet access because they have a connection to the government. So we actually redesigned the site about a year ago.
Face-to-face dealings are still a very important part of doing business here, but it's worth the effort. The Myanmar tourism industry has grown by 92% in the past year, and there's more growth expected. The economic fundamentals are starting to head in the right direction.
Where you can just select. I saw some underlying changes that could lead to reform. I wanted to come back so that I could position myself in industry that has exponential potential to grow when the country opens up.
Myanmar is moving forward in its own way. Deeply held traditions continue, but against the backdrop of a country which is modernising and changing.
I think people in this country have had a huge amount of patience over the years, and we have, had the occasional bursts of outrage, of demonstrations in 1974, in 1988, 96, in 2007. But there is also an underlying fear, and although in Rangoon now people are so much more confident, so much more prepared to speak their mind, out in the districts, the old habits die hard.
While there's a veneer of order and conformity, there are divisions too. In several parts of the country, Myanmar is at war with itself. Human rights abuses continue, and the government has been in brutal conflict with ethnic groups such as the Rohingyas, the Karen and the Kachin.
So I think it's really important, though, not to forget that this is a country which still has ethnic conflicts in which people are being killed every week, both the army, the ethnic rebels, but also civilians. And in particular, in the north, those conflicts are very live, but even elsewhere in the country, they're still quite tentative peace deals which have not really been cemented into a proper political framework.
Over the past 18 months, the government and the leaders of all of the ethnic armed groups have reached initial ceasefire agreements or equivalent agreements. We're now in the middle of intensive discussions every week, every month, on a national ceasefire agreement, which would be the first signed in 70 years, if it is signed.
Everybody put your hands together and do like this.
Back across the river in Dalar, the children at the Sunshine Kindergarten are getting ready for graduation. It only costs their parents $3 a term to send them here. But even that is big money in a neighbourhood like this one.
Do you worry about the future for these children? Because life is more difficult for poor children.
That's right. I'm worried a lot. I'm worried for them. Some children, after this finish, if they can continue the government school, how to do his life is no education, then he will not get a good job and his life is just finished, you know. So I'm very worried for them.
Vung Dae Lun wants to continue teaching here, even though she could get a much better paying job in Yangon. For her, money isn't important.
Yes, I want to be your friend. Not important. Yeah, I really want to change the people in the law. I really want to open their eyes and open their heart.
Oh, I love you.
Vung Dae Lun and her husband also have dreams for their own child, 3-month-old Rebecca. They want her to learn and to have the best opportunities.
Hello. Even 3 months, I talk to her. I want to hear back something from her. So it's really also give me a lesson. I have to listen from the children as well. She is precious to me, and the children are also precious for their parents.
Myanmar is an experiment in motion. It's unclear whether the economic, social and political reforms will reach those most in need.
What I hope is that the economy will grow, we'll continue to see a more open political environment, but that we'll be able to learn lessons from the experiences of other countries and catch up in a way that actually benefits the majority of people here.
See the West moving in, and I guess that's good, but material things are not my heart, it's not my heart.
For now, there's hope for those who see Myanmar finally taking its place in the international community.
Keep an open mind, but your heart right here at home.
I want to see that the country is moving forward every day, and I think the future is going to be better and brighter.